Welcome to Modern Home Masterminds with Bespoke Brokers. I'm Shauna Glazier, designated broker and owner.
And I'm Brittany Williamson, associate broker with Bespoke Real Estate. Shauna and I are Bespoke Real Estate, and we're also your guides to modern luxury across the entire state of Arizona.
Each week, we chat with masterminds shaping the modern spaces. Do you want to get a behind-the-scenes look at your design team's processes? Open communication and teamwork will lead to a successful project.
From architects to builders, designers, and more, let's explore the art of modern living together.
All right. Welcome back, listeners. Do you know what the one thing that actually adds value to your home as it ages? It's landscape. And today's guest, Stephen Bardorf, is here to share some of his insights with us.
Yes, Stephen is the owner of Flo Design Construction, a modern landscape architecture firm headquartered right here in the Valley of the Sun. He is a master at transforming the rugged beauty of the Arizona desert into a stunning, sustainable oasis that perfectly complements modern architecture.
Yeah, so welcome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. And mastermind, too.
A mastermind.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
That's why you're
Very
here.
complimentary.
So, Stephen, with us being in real estate, we know that interior finishes and even sometimes architecture really starts to date the home after it as it ages. But what you do, however, it only makes it better. So maybe tell our listeners a little bit about your process and how you plan your landscape design, knowing that it eventually is going to evolve and mature.
Sure. I think that my process it's probably very similar to many other professional designers' processes, and that is that, first of all, there's an observation kind of thing. If you're talking about a residence, for example, sometimes there's commercial space or something like that, but you really just kind of take a look first, and just examine. It's really a process of gathering fact, and I think that happens on, pretty much every site. It has to happen at some time, and sometimes it happens before the house is even there, So you're kind of crashing around in the desert a little bit. You have a plan, and sometimes the builder, like construction zone or something, will have these things staked out so you can kind of tell where things are, but you really don't even have a house there yet. But you're still gathering fact, But there's extraordinary things that happen, just out in the desert, in the natural environment, just by natural phenomenon. Sometimes they're so important that it will even inform the architecture, These things are specific to the site. So,
Like maybe, for instance, a boulder or a certain tree.
It could be geologic. It doesn't have to be a plant. There's a big old ironwood tree or something, and we say, well, we can't move it because sometimes we do move these things, but it could very well inform how the site is utilized. But assuming that there's a house actually there, a gathering of data and information about the place, and whether it's from the natural environment or just sun or whatever it happens to be, taking information about how that place is what it is and why, or what it's supposed to be. There's a property owner typically, or there's an architect, and they probably have some kind of requests, like I need to do X, Y, Z, and just somewhere on the property or something. But those are programmatic, it's like there's a design program, I need a place to do X, Y, or Z. And then you take all those facts and hopefully you have some type of plan or something in front of you, got to take it back to the office, you're kind of figuring these things out in your mind, but on paper a little bit. But there's a list of stuff, and throughout that whole list, these requests or these facts need to be satisfied or addressed. And as you address them, or as I address them in my mind, or on paper too, some solutions might be better than others, and some, seem like they're right on or not. So I might have, 3 or 4 solutions to one kind of piece of the puzzle. And from there, it's kind of like almost like a pros and cons kind of thing. So you're juggling a whole bunch of things at once. And, I say, well, I could go about it in this way, but there's 5 pros and 3 cons. And then there's this one I could go about this way, and there's 4 pros, but there's only 2 cons, but they're really bad. So I'm going to go with 1, but I'm not going to forget 2, So it sounds like it's kind of a process of elimination,
Sure.
But that goes for planting design too. I can talk about that in a sec. But as you address all of these facts and the resolution of those facts, the design evolves from that. And it's really not, I think people oftentimes think that there's just a bunch of good ideas floating around, or someone who has a otherwise bunch of great ways to approach things just kind of comes up with a bunch of ideas. But they really evolve out of the overall process, or the synthesis of fact. And planting design in and of itself is actually a process of elimination too. And I think people might think that I or anybody else, doing these things, maybe some people do, but I don't have this vast knowledge of plant material. I know what I know, but I know what I need to, and if I need something, I have to research it for further fact to find out.
Right.
I prefer not to guess either. But you say, okay, well, I need this type of plant in here, but it has to be native. So you eliminate like 99.8% of all plants,
Yes.
right? And you're left with this little bit. You're like, okay, well, it can only be this wide. Okay, so you eliminate another, 85% of plants. You keep whittling it down till you get to like 3 or 4 plants. And then I think you're kind of at pros and cons again. Like, this one has pros and cons. This one doesn't too. This would probably be better. I'd choose that one because, but there's always a reason why, So it's not just like coming up with stuff, but that's basically how it goes.
In part of your process, I've seen a couple of your jobs. You've worked on a couple of our houses, but the last one on Joshua Tree, I'm never in the meetings where you're actually, I got to see you come in with the whole design plan. Yeah. Put it on our dining table. Did you hand draw?
I did hand draw that. I still do hand draw things. And it's probably
and it's
part
amazing.
of it.
Like I thought it was drafted by a computer.
Yeah, no.
But we gave
well,
you.
there is a computer involved, but as far as the stuff that looked like I drew it, I did draw that.
Yeah.
But they put some plant images on there and stuff that is involved in the computer and kind of
like
put it
stuff like this. I
do that by hand.
So
I don't draw like that anymore, but.
But you did that one by hand?
Yeah. That's
oh my goodness.
Those take way too long, and then I started to get like arthritis too. My hands don't work, so they look a little bit different, but they're kind of far out. They're a little bit scribbly.
But back to your process though, like I hear all those factors. One of them is also budget for each project. Yeah. But he came in on the dining table, with the architect and like showed us what the plan was. And then from there, it was just a whole nother conversation. And we all looked at it at the table, and then we went and walked with the plans at each space and made adjustments. It was really special from my perspective, from the real estate perspective. We're not normally invited to those meetings to see how that, how you show your clients what it could be. Cause I just see, a blank canvas, and it's really interesting, your design background.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, as you can see on that one, you see how I addressed all the facts. That's what I was describing before. Right. So you walk through it and you're like, oh yeah, all those things that that one's neat. That's to describe a part of the process that I kind of didn't mention before. One of those things, like the thing around the tree where there's like, there's that steel thing. Yep. That solution comes from the fact that there's a pile of rocks on the site. Like, we're going to do all this rock. They're big rocks too. So there's a pile, and like, we don't want to haul them off. It costs a bunch of money, take stuff away. Well, where can I use this stuff? And then I look around the site and I'm like, can't go over there. Can't go over there. I could probably bring it in the backyard. Yeah. This is mostly concrete and stuff. Like, I bet I could use it over here. And then that starts the next level of the discussion about how to address this issue that happened to be, just a material sitting on site, but it turned out pretty good. So it's like turns into like this geometry.
It's fantastic. It really is.
It's like a lot of common sense. I love it.
Yeah.
I never would have. I love the way you described that, because I wouldn't have thought about it that way. I would have thought about it the way you mentioned, like just thinking somebody comes in with a lot of good ideas and they know their plants, and not this elimination, but it makes total sense.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Some people think, I've heard people say like, you have really good taste. Or something like, I'm like, I gotta tell you, I don't think I have taste anymore. But that's a good point, because some people think, or they say, you have this, you have this idea or something in mind, and they think that the designer is using their personal preference. But I'm never using my personal preference. Ever, because my personal preference doesn't matter. Like, someone says to me all the time, they go like, do you like this plant? You know, and I don't really want to get into an elongated conversation about it, but whether I like the plant is irrelevant. I don't like one plant better than another at all. I think they're all, it's like there's no one color that's better than another color either.
Sure.
You know, I mean, there's inappropriately specified
subjective.
colors, that's for sure. But that's how you end up with people's houses with some weird colored wall. You know, they for some reason have a proclivity for this color.
Yeah.
You know, and they put it up on the wall.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah,
doesn't
but
really,
with you, I think they're going to really rely on you if they have an idea of what they want their plant to be. You have the expertise to be like, that plant is not going to work because of the sun, because
Right.
of the shade,
Right.
because of the
that
weather,
was the whole
whatever.
fact thing I was talking about.
Yeah. So how does modern architecture kind of affect the way that you design? You know, how do those two things integrate? Because obviously you're very facts based, and
Yeah.
but you do seem to in all of the designs that I've seen, you seem to meld these things perfectly.
As far as modern or more today looking architecture, you know.
Yes, or even something like the construction
Well,
zone,
and we have some
Yes,
photos here
yes.
too that we can
Yeah.
talk to.
Well, you know, without reducing contemporary architecture, there's a very small number of very attractive things being composed in this stuff. You know, these things, they're composed in a way where they're very direct, you know, and that's why, you know, the landscape can respond to a very direct reaction to that, where a bunch of fussy stuff, you know, plant material or otherwise, really does not align with the today looking architecture that you might be looking at. But it did inform design, you know, in general later in the future as I was doing these things, because I'd say, you know, I'd rather put in one massive old tree than put in like 8 or 9 small ones that don't really, you know, it's kind of impactful stuff, you know, and there is this, natural beauty to this tree that's been growing out in the desert for, 75 years or something. It might take a really big effort to get this thing craned in over the house and put in this special spot. But it has its own innate beauty to it to begin with. You start slapping in a bunch of little plants.
this
There's a big old,
is that
big
a-
old saguaro.
Is that Upper Ridge?
That's at,
No?
what's that? It's
No. It's,
the one in Clearwater.
Yeah, that is Upper Ridge.
So
That's
is that
the office
Saguaro?
right
That's
there.
funny.
Yeah. Oh, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
So you craned that in?
Yeah.
Or was that on site prior?
um,
And you harvest, like,
I remember that now. You know what? That one was, it was, I don't remember where it came from, whatever. Well, but we brought it up. Well, the Saguaro Salvage Company brought it up the hill, you know, and the crane was on site. I knew where the crane was, knew where it was going. Oh no, I purchased that Saguaro. But it had to get up over the house, you know, and you're way up on top of this.
yep.
So high up there to begin with. And yeah, he drove it all the way up there, and it salvaged the trees. The saguaro salvaged like that on the cradle, like that, you know. And it's protected. It's got like carpets around it and stuff.
Yeah.
But they strap it in there, and we know where it's going, so we dig a hole, which is not particularly large. You'd think it's fairly tree holes are huge, but I crane it up over the house and drop it in place, and it looks like it shouldn't stand up, but it actually does. But there's braces on it and things like that, and we're attempting to make it root over a period of time, so it'll kind of get some stability in there. But on that project, there's like
It looks
20.
it looks amazing now.
We
I
get
mean,
Yeah.
so many
We do.
compliments walking through that. It's like every window that you look out at that house, there's like a perfect saguaro. Or I mean, it really.
Yeah, I did do that. That was intentional.
well, it may. I mean, and people ask us like, were
Yeah.
these here already,
How'd
or
that
were
happen?
these placed? And we have to say, no, it's you.
Yeah, that's how it happened. That side was tough because there's no dirt, so it's difficult to describe how these things sort of get into the ground. You're driving around the desert and you see saguaro just like growing out of all these rocks. That does not mean that you can take a saguaro and drop it in a bunch of rocks and have it
Right.
survive, because natural phenomenon of a plant growing out of some severe environment is different than transplantation. So in this case, the whole place is rock, so you can't dig a hole in rock and try to make it survive. So we're basically piling up all these geologics and bringing in boulders and stuff which are already sitting on site. But we're also craning in the backfill planting material too. That's the stuff that we're going to set these plants in. So in that area that are familiar with, where all that saguaro stand was 2 saguaro stands. But we had to backfill all that stuff. That's after all the boulders kind of in a, hopefully a natural way. It looks like there's some kind of movement, there's some gravity going on. It looks like the house just kind of was fit around this piece of the mountain kind of thing. But anytime there's something planted in there, we actually put the dirt in there too, planting medium, and then planted it in there. So you get to provide for the plant to stay alive too.
So interesting. So what inspired you to get into landscape architecture and design?
It came from me coming to Arizona for the first time, because I was in college. I was probably about like halfway through-ish, probably 1990 or something like that. And my roommate's parents lived at the boulders in the wintertime. And I was from New Hampshire, I never really left that region of I maybe gone to Florida or something. We didn't travel. I was kind of a kid, didn't really know, but yeah, and I got here at night. So I had no idea what's going on. And I got to the airport, and I came at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and they sent like the concierge down there to get me, but we drove all the way up Scottsdale Road, and because there was no 101. And the Boulders Resort, it's like way up there on Scottsdale Road, and they had it all illuminated there. And I got out of there, the car, and it was like this new smell, It doesn't smell like anything. It's just not anything I'd experienced, but I could kind of see these shadows and stuff, what was going on, and I didn't really know. I just went to bed, and then I woke up, and it was kind of in the middle of the desert. I'd never seen it before, but at the time there's no internet either. So other than maybe an advertisement or something, I didn't really get golf resort thing, desert thing, whatever. But so we're gonna play golf, and we're driving a golf cart so far out, in this golf cart driving around this resort thing, and eventually I just made the mental leap that someone made this place, and I didn't really, I'd never seen anything like it really. In New Hampshire we got like a couple resort here and there up in the mountains or something. It's not like that.
Yeah.
But so I was like, somebody made this. Like, like, how does this happen? I'm familiar with golf course architecture and just general landscape, I guess, but not to study it. But after kind of researching it a little bit, which is hard with no internet, by the way.
I could imagine.
I guess we could go to the encyclopedia, find out. Go to the library.
Where do you even start?
Yeah, right. It's like, I think the only thing I'd know about it is in like a magazine or something. There's no way to get that info. I could have looked up the Sonoran Desert in the card catalog, found a bunch of books on it and read about it. But after researching it, it was like, okay, well, there's developers involved. There's home builders involved. And the development part of it, who lays out the streets, The streets there, they didn't just appear, but I noticed, there's a wayfinding thing there too. There's a branding, there's like this, little symbol. And they're on the street signs and stuff. And, I kind of started researching that, and it looked like the fun part of it was the landscape architectural stuff. Of course, the golf course is kind of fun too, but I just started researching it, and I just applied to school or in graduate school. Like, I didn't even study it in undergrad. I was studying literature and painting, So I just was, I'm going to go study landscape architecture, I guess. So I studied that.
I love it.
The rest is histoire. But
that's such a great story. I can relate. I remember coming out here for the first time from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially up at the boulders, like that's a whole, like
new world.
It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. So I think that's a very cool story that it kind of drew you into your profession.
Yeah. And it wasn't the plants. I mean, that far out. The plants were really wild. It's like, oh my God, I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
But it was more like the place itself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the plants are fun. But I did go to graduate school. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I was there for 3 years. We basically learned the entire eastern deciduous forest when you're in school. And then I packed up and moved to Arizona to the Sonoran Desert. But this is real.
So you had to relearn?
Yeah, but this is nowhere near the size of, eastern forests, but
Yeah.
there's not that many plants here comparatively. I mean, there's thousands as opposed
Yeah.
to tens of thousands. So you can learn that easy.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question. So what are some of the challenges or considerations that come with designing for the desert?
Well, depends on where in the desert, I would say. You know, a lot of these places around here are relatively flat. You know, you go through much of the neighborhoods of PV, and they're kind of flat. You know, but when we get up into these things where we're on the side of a mountain, these are these hillside properties like that one. It's a massive challenge to get into the site, and they're particularly remote. And it's not like you can just drive up and just drive in there. You know, these things are like, you know, I saw on that project, you know, we're in a shuttle, you know, going from the bottom of the road out. The guy, you know, one of the guys forgets his shovel. He's got to, you know, take the cart down half a mile to go get the shovel. So, you know, access is difficult because there's, you know, it's steep, you know, and my crews are working, they're climbing up and down this stuff, and they're on foot basically. But, we're not really getting equipment in there. You know, we have relatively small equipment, you know, for using, you know, a small Bobcat or something like that. But we really don't use that too much because it's not particularly accessible. But the geology of it's a little bit out there too, because it's all rock, you know, and we kind of have to make space for our plants. I need a plant over here, you know, for whatever reason. It might not be just me, but everybody might need it. And you got to find a place for it, and you got to dig it out and prepare for that. So it's challenging in regard to the fact that there's a bunch of rock. I mean, but you go into Arcadia that's, you know, been flood irrigated for 100 years, and it's like, you know, falling off a log there. Just dig a little bit. It's really, you know, I live in a flood irrigated lot, but you know, one of the biggest challenges lately is the lack of monsoon season. I would say. And we've kind of skipped it for 4 of the last 5 years. And it's really important for plants, you know. It's especially important for the native plant material, including saguaros, which, as you probably heard, are falling over here and there. And they tend to fall over anyway, just maybe not quite at this rate. But people have exotic plants too. Now, just because it's an exotic plant doesn't necessarily mean that it struggles for survival. You know, you have like an olive tree or something, and it's coming from parts of the world, in the Mediterranean area, that it's kind of used to this. One of the best exotic plants that grows around here is a date palm that's native to like Saudi Arabia or something like that. So, you know, this is kind of cool compared, but that works. But you know, leafy exotics are very difficult. I don't really do that a lot. You know, if there's a kind of courtyard thing or something like that, I might be doing that. But the monsoon season is important because it's not just the rain, you know. There's a temperature drop, and that's relief for the plants. And there's also kind of like fairly occasional but fairly regular cloud cover. You know, in a normal monsoon season, every 3rd or 3rd or 4th day, it's kind of cloudy, you know. But the plants are like, oh, thank you. You know, they just get a little break. But there's moisture in the air. You know, dew point's supposed to be up around 60, 70, even after a rainstorm, maybe more the next morning or something. And the plants are taking in moisture from the air too. So when you have these plants that are, they're always struggling. Any plant's always struggling for survival. Unless it's like in a rainforest, you know, like swampy thing, something, or it's just perfectly suited for that. And these plants are very well suited, but you know, a little bit of bump on the road, and there's going to be some problems, you know. And that's why the saguaros are so, you know, terribly affected by this whole thing. It's just exposure, you know. But that's a big problem. I mean, for design, yeah, you know, it's the terrain on occasion. But really, for as far as plants go, we're having a little monsoon problem at the moment.
We sure are. What is a piece of advice that you can give someone, maybe for our listeners out there, someone who's looking to redesign their outdoor space?
I would say, don't try it yourself. That's the first thing I would say. Don't try it yourself. It's really more complicated than it seems. You know, there's an order to this. Like any construction process, there's an order to it. And I think people oftentimes like the idea, well, you know, I'm going to design it myself, you know, because I know what I want, you know. But knowing what you want does not necessarily mean you can design something because of, that whole pros and cons and,
The facts.
process, all the fact gathering, But I think people just kind of, they want to, but that's on the level of gardening, and gardens are cool, gardeners are cool, that's fine. That's kind of a trial and error thing. But I always tell people, if you want to, you should have your own little garden, do your thing, you want to grow stuff here and there or whatever. But to get the bones of this together, there is a process and there's an order to it. And I've seen people just kind of spend a bunch of money and just have it not, none of it's right. And if you're dealing with the living thing part of it, they're going to die, So there's a lot to it. So I would say the best advice would make sure you have a qualified professional just coming into it.
And what's great about you, and I'm sure a lot of landscape architects out there, designers, we get asked a lot as realtors, like, hey, what would you do? How would you do this? We were on a listing appointment yesterday and they want to know what should they do to their front yard. And I've used you multiple times. I'll have a client that has a budget and curb appeal is the most important thing to sell your house. It's what people see first. And so it's important. And it's been great to invite you over and let you do your thing. Here's the budget, take over, you do the hardscape, the landscape, and it looks amazing. And every client has been so impressed. So thank you for all that.
Absolutely. I would say also that that maintenance is particularly important. And it doesn't mean that someone has to be there, gardening all the time. And it doesn't mean that someone has to be there with their blower all the time. But someone's got to care. And someone's got to watch it. And even if it's native, someone's got to watch that. And someone has to be aware of that place. So it's kind of, it's not really a gardener, but it's pretty close.
So how are you maintaining all of your projects, or what, 50-50? Or?
We do maintenance for a certain time period, and then I connect the client with a qualified maintenance company, of which I have several, that I give them all this stuff because I trust them. I know what they do, and they're very good at it. I think I probably maybe give them too much work here and there. They go, I don't have any more space. But we take care of it for a while. We have to watch and make sure everything's functioning properly, irrigation-wise or otherwise. And sometimes there's a little bit of experimentation involved, and if it turns into the non-soon, I got to kind of take care of that.
The non-soon.
I like that.
Yeah, the non-soon. So there's kind of a transition period there after we're sort of leaving the property and the maintenance company's coming in. We're downloading all that information to them and all about the irrigation system and the lighting system and where stuff is and where stuff isn't. And then they develop a knowledge of that place and they have a working knowledge of it also. So they're kind of watching, and someone's watching and caring for it without, being out there with their little trimmers all the time. Do that. That does tend to happen in Arcadia here and there. But, they're beautiful. They're kind of fussy, but, they're very beautiful. But they have, full-time gardener people on. But a native landscape will disappear if someone doesn't take care of it, And then that kind of fades out a little bit after a while. But it's transplantation. The whole landscape, unless there's an existing tree there, it's transplantation. So you're fooling the plant into thinking that it's kind of supposed to be there because it grew in the nursery somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're putting it on a truck and bringing it over there, and it's got its new home.
Yeah.
But that's how it works.
All right. Time for a little rapid fire.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a couple questions, just light, fun. First thing that comes to mind. So favorite plant for desert landscape. What's your favorite plant?
I just say
He did.
What did you say?
I already answered that.
He said earlier,
Oh, yeah,
there's
they're all the
not a plant better than the other, but this is a good. Is there a plant that you use more often?
Or recommend? How about this? What about what desert plant don't you like?
Yeah.
He likes them all.
They're all. Yeah, I don't know. They're all the same. No, I did find a beautiful little Joshua tree at one time in the nursery because I'm in the nursery all the time, and I found a beautiful little. It was perfect. It's only like 3 feet tall.
Is that the one that you planted?
Yeah. Well, I didn't plant it. I just put it up on that little thing in my front yard. It's not planted, but it's a 20-inch box plant, which is rare because you never see 20-inch boxes. It was kind of like a mini thing, and I was like, oh, that I actually like that. I think I personally like that. I'm gonna have include my personal preference.
There you go.
You're allowed to do
There it
that at
is,
your own
right
house.
there. So, come to Papa. I need that tree. So I brought it to my house.
I love that.
But I didn't plant it. It's sort of on a little thing, you know. It's kind of up out of the ground a little bit. My neighbors are like, why the hell can't this guy put a plant on the ground? But it is pretty cool now.
It's like the interior designer that just leans pictures against the wall everywhere.
Yeah, I do that too.
Why don't you ask number 4 next?
All right. Are there any landscaping? Oh, number 4?
Yeah. Well,
What does your yard look like?
My yard, that's a good question. I'll tell you how it started. It was it's like a half an acre of a flood irrigated lot, and there's nothing in it when I bought the house, and there's still barely anything in it. But
I've been there. I've seen it.
You've seen it, yeah.
It's bare.
But you know what? There was this.
Did you send us a picture of it?
I probably should. I do have a picture. Yeah. Yeah, there was this carob tree in the backyard, and carob trees are really a great tree. It's an exotic tree, and it used to be used quite a bit around Arcadia and stuff, and they don't really use them anymore. They're what do you call it? They're called dioecious trees. So there's a female tree, and there's a male tree, and then there's also a hermaphrodite tree. I'm lucky enough to have the hermaphrodite tree in my yard. That means
Me too.
yeah. So the female tree has all these seed pods on it, which is where carob comes from. And I'm not farming over there or anything. Like I don't eat stuff like that out of the yard. But and the male tree has this terrible odor to it, which you've probably experienced driving around Arcadia in the springtime. But this one is the hermaphrodite, so it has both. So it doesn't have too many pods on it. Doesn't have this odor to it. But it's a great tree. So I bought that. That was there, and then I found another one way at a nursery, and I planted that in the front yard. So I have, sort of off to the side, in the flood, but I blocked off the flood just to have it only in the back. That's it.
Okay.
So there's 2 trees, and the front is dirt, pretty much. And then I found that Joshua tree, that little guy.
Do your neighbors know what you do?
No, I told them, but I don't know if they believe me or
When
not.
I went to his house, it was the most confusing thing because I see what he's doing on these $20 million estates all over Arizona, and it's just mind-blowing how talented you are. And then I got to his house, and I was like, what is going on?
There are a lot of chefs that don't like to cook when they get home.
It's not like stabilized granite. It's just dirt. It's not fancy dirt.
Well, let me clarify. It's not exactly just dirt. I mean, it is dirt. Well, I had the Joshua tree in the box, and then I had a bag of desert marigold seed, like seed, and I just threw that out there. Wow. So that kind of comes in a little bit here and there around the Joshua tree. So the Joshua tree is not planted, but they get this little 8 months out of the year, there's a nice wildflower thing going on, and I got a couple lights on the Joshua tree. But the rest of it's a half an acre of nutgrass. It's not even it's not even a lawn.
It's low maintenance.
But what do I need a landscape for? I don't need that. But so I do experimental stuff around there. If I could find a plant that might be kind of neat that I've never used before, like this Arabian lilac plant is fantastic, and no one ever uses it. And I was just like, I grabbed my foreman and I said, just put a couple in over here or something, and it worked out great, So it's kind of experimental.
Oh, that's
I did a Texas olive I put in there just to kind of a shrubby thing, see what would happen. So I kind of use it as like this lab, I guess. Or find a plant, they'll see if it kind of works or not, and I just put them. There's no design to it whatsoever. I did put up a little wall because. Well, actually, it's kind of tall, but my neighbor has these lights up in the eaves of his, and he's just blowing me away with these lights, and I'm like, I don't even want to talk to this dude. I just want to I'm just gonna put up a wall and block out the hot spots on the lights so I don't have to see it. So I'm walking through my house. I don't have any shades in my house, so, but yeah, I just want to block out the lights. So there's a wall back there. It kind of hangs out. Yeah. I'll put a couple little green ficus thing in front of it or something. But it's sort of this experimental landscape lab thing for plants.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's it.
The lab.
Yeah.
All right. If you weren't a designer, what would you be? You mentioned painter. You're into art, literature.
Then I'd have to be a painter. That would be pretty rough. But I probably would, I guess. Oh man. Yeah.
Are we talking about like
My
painting
parents told me not to
houses
do. Don't be a
or
painter.
art?
What's that?
Are we talking like art, like fine art, or are we talking like actual painting?
No,
Like
no,
painting
fine,
a house?
Fine art.
Fine art.
Yeah, I'd be pretty bad at walls, I think. I'm not that meticulous about things
funny.
like that.
Are
But
there
yeah.
are there any landscaping rules that you like to break?
Not particularly. It is construction, so there's a little bit of experimentation involved here and there if I'm willing to come back and but I would say there's not a lot to break really. The hard and fast rules, I think you're going to end up with a puddle, which is bad. And I think if it were something structural, it's going to fall over, But if there's rules, I guess those are the rules that inform the design as I described it before. But yeah, I probably wouldn't break a hard and fast rule. I really probably wouldn't do that just because probably it's not my, I break them in my house.
I was going to say, it's
In the landscape lab.
Yeah,
That's where we break the rules.
Somebody's house, I'm like, I don't want to mess around with this person's yard. It's like I'm not inventing anything here. I think the rules get bent a little bit with that many facts involved. There's a great creative energy and the synthesis of fact. Plus you get your answers out of it too. So I would say that's maybe the process is a little bit different. So that might qualify.
What about, is there an essential tool that you can't live without?
Design.
There you go.
I could tell you that when I do draw things, the arthritis is bugging me, so I don't draw that much, but I got to have these 4 pens because the pens also kind of work with this other, just kind of like it's basically a marker, really, and it's a little bit rudimentary as far as presentation stuff. It looks professional, but I've learned to use these 4 pens alongside of this other marker thing, and as I draw, because of the material, because of the ink, some get erased and some don't. So I have to know when ink is going away and when it's not. But that's why they look sort of painterly, because I'm very aware of these 4 pens. So I would say that's pretty important to the drawing. And I could take 1 pen and, draw something stupid. I could do that. But for the overall look of the thing, if it's going to be a graphic discourse, I would have to have those 4. So I hope they don't get like discontinued or something.
Should buy up as many as you can.
Yeah.
Stock them up.
Yep. All right, Stephen, I think we are at the end here. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been a joy to kind of listen to your process.
My pleasure.
And it's very enlightening. We will link your contact information if you would like in our show notes.
You can, yes.
We also would like for you to tell people where they can find you.
Not on the internet. Really, I would say call Shauna Glazier,
Okay.
and she'd be glad to give you my info. And you have your phone number on there and stuff, and send it on over. I'll be glad to talk to you.
He really is a mastermind in these spaces and hard to get a hold of. I do remember in a meeting with a bunch of realtors talking about you and how amazing you are and showing them pictures of your work, and then you walked by and they were like, hey, can we have a business card? How do we find you? How do you? And you're like, nope. And you left.
No, I said I don't have a business card.
I don't have a business card.
I should have said I have a cell phone. Here's my cell phone number. But that's what I was in. I'm right. But I don't have a business card.
We'll link that. Yeah. For referral only. But no. But yeah, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
And I'm very glad to articulate all that stuff because I never verbalized that. So that was kind of a new thing for me.
Yeah, it's good for our listeners to hear.
Absolutely.
So hope you enjoyed our Modern Home Mastermind. If you have, please subscribe, rate us online.
Thanks so much to our guest for sharing his insights. And thank you, our listeners, for learning about everything modern with us.
Yeah, and if you're ready to take your next step in your real estate journey, please reach out to us at Bespoke Real Estate. And until next time, keep living, loving everything modern.